Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Allen, a second-year strategist. And I have the pleasure of introducing Howard Jordan Jr. this morning. For those of us who don't see advertising as the end-all be-all, or maybe those of us who just would like to work in something other than advertising at some point in our career, Howard's journey is a bit of a welcome sight. Not only has he worked as a writer, a strategist, and a creative director on brands like State Farm, Coke Zero, and Beats by Dre, but recently Howard followed his passion and transitioned into a career in the entertainment industry. He started off working as a staff writer on the CBS sitcom Superior Donuts, and is now a story editor on the Netflix original series Family Reunion, I'm sorry about that, which premieres later this year. It's not out yet. Yeah. So we're going to do it a little differently today. Howard and Vann have known each other for a very long time. So as opposed to just having Howard present, we're going to have the two of them discuss Howard's career, the state of the industry, all that good stuff before we open it up to questions from everybody here. So earlier this week, Howard told me that he hadn't been back to VCU for almost 20 years. So let's give a warm welcome back to Howard.
We've got 5 empty reserved seats. I actually have a few friends that came to visit, and some of your undergraduate teachers as well that were 1 year behind me, Marcel, same year as me, Bridget. But I got 5 seats up front, and I was just wondering if we had any Richmond natives. I met a guy earlier in this room that went to Maggie Walker. Where is he? Is he in here yet? Come sit down front, please. And I graduated James Madison University in '97, so I'm wondering if anyone went to JMU. Anyone in here? Come sit down front. I'm literally like, if I could impart 1 or 2 lessons, one is going to be, you know, when you guys go out, I stepped in on Peter's interview class earlier, and having familiarity with someone on any level is a leg up. And so in your interviews, when you're figuring out how to bond with someone, to connect with someone, to stand out from the other very talented people that are interviewing, you need to have something in common. I don't care if you make it up, but you need something. So I've got 3 more seats. I need people to fill in the seats. So when I was at school, I played #1 singles for 2 years at Hermitage High School. Any #1 singles tennis players, come on down. When I started, I was straight out of undergrad. My undergrad roommate for 3 years is here, so he knows how crazy and immature I was. But I was 21 when I got here, and the rest of the people were, it felt like 28, 29. So if there's anyone here who came straight from undergrad, you gotta come down. So, okay, we're filled in. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it over. Hello, everyone. At the end, please don't be shy. Please ask questions. As a former student, I know one of the things that I always wanted to do was ask more and more questions. So I really wanted this to be a conversation and not a presentation, because I want this to be for you guys. And also, I didn't want to do anything keynote.
There you go. Yeah. And just so you know, I have this seat because I'm bald and African American. So he actually, that was part of the requirements for me to be a part of this interview myself.
At a certain point, you get called a shot.
So I'm going to get to it so that we can actually open the floor up to questions on the back end. And I've asked Howard to be honest, to be frank. We're all family here. It's important that as a part of the learning process, we as folks who have done this for a while are candid, honest, and frank. Many of you are on the start of a journey that's gonna, when you get to the middle and end of it, are gonna say, this is crazy, what was I thinking? But there are also parts where you're gonna really be excited about where you landed and why you made this choice. So let me start with this, which just makes me feel old. Because I'm older than you, and you were part of the second graduating class of the Ad Center. What made you decide to come here? And, you know, if you could go back in time and talk to the 21-year-old Howard, what would you tell him? What would be the advice?
So going backwards, talking to 21-year-old Howard, I would say don't take everything so personally. Sometimes the system that's in place is just the system that's in place, and you have to, everything that comes to you that doesn't play in your favor is not a personal affront to you. So that is very important, because I know I fought a lot of battles that I probably didn't have to fight, but I was 21, I was young, I was green in this business as well, but also that's just my temperament as well. Like, it happened to me, so it is personal. It took a couple of really good friends to say that's how it works, and you have to figure out how to be resourceful and work around it. So once I started doing that, that was a change in my life, personally and professionally. Going backwards, why the ads? Sorry. I'm gonna say Ad Center, Brand Center, off and on. So, and our original founder, Diane Cook, is here as well, because she's always been a mentor and a good friend. And she's in the front. But the reason I ended up here was, it was kind of by chance. When I was, I'll tell a short-ish version, but when I was 12 years old, the '88 Olympics, I saw a cotton commercial that touched the feel of cotton, the fabric of your lives. And I was walking to my bus stop, and I remember thinking, a billion people just saw that. I remember thinking that as a kid. I remember humming that song, and that was the moment I decided I wanted to be in advertising. But I didn't know how. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what moves to make. So fast forward to graduating from James Madison with a marketing degree. They didn't have an advertising program. And somewhere I found a copy of this big journal called Red Book, and it had all the addresses to every advertising agency in the country. And I wrote 50 open letters. And I got responses from, it's funny to think of it now, because I've been in that spot to receive the cold call about wanting to get into advertising, and typically ignore it. But I got 20 letters back inside of, I'd say, a month and a half. And one of them was from the marketing agency telling me that they were starting a school, and they were trying to populate what would become its second graduating class. And I packed up everything. Omari can tell you, I packed up everything, drove down from Harrisonburg, Virginia, drove straight here, met the writing teacher, and got the materials, I should say, and met a writing teacher named Kaz Katsias, who became my first writing teacher, advertising and writing teacher. And I took at the time it was actually on paper. I don't know that it's on these submission materials on paper anymore. But I created a portfolio in 7 days using glue stick and marker and running it multiple times through a word processor, and created a portfolio and came back with it, interviewed again, and in a 9-day period I heard about the school and was accepted to the school, and inside of 6 weeks I was started.
So that means I need to make sure our admissions process works a lot faster.
Yes, yeah, because there might be some stragglers who just don't know how to break in. And that was it for me.
Vann, too, we always save a few spots in every track, because we learned real quick that some of the very best applicants were going to come, in the last couple of weeks. So we made sure that there were at least 2 spots in every track that were held for whoever the universe had decided was going to fly in.
Yeah, and so apparently I fell into that.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to be in advertising. From the moment I kind of discovered it existed as a job. And so at Hermitage High School, I would just, I wasn't popular enough to be on the yearbook staff, but I wrote well enough to be on the newspaper staff. So anything I could do to write with a little personality, I took every opportunity. So that's I found my way to it found its way to me, but typical, as you guys will experience, whether you stay in this business for 20 years or not, what ultimately happens is if you're doing what you really love, not for an award or not for the praise, to receive the praise of someone else, it'll naturally put you on the track of where you want to be. And so writing all those open letters so naively landed me here, ultimately.
And if you guys dig up the time capsule on the back of the building, you will find a red book. They do exist.
Yep.
They are about the size. Do people still use phone books? Let's say they're about the size of a phone book, but that's a horrible reference. Now my age is really showing. You brought Richmond people up front, and this is not on my cards, but it's funny, Bridget Camden is here as well, who went to the ad center as well, who grew up with me in Gitter Park, Northside, and I realized that when I was in school, you were Northside as well, so that's also another awesome reality about community. And that's why when you're working with folks in these projects and you're pissed off at Joey, John, or Sally, or whomever, just know that it's a part of the process of learning and growing, and one day that person will be sitting across from you in an interview. And there were several times that I wanted to hire Howard, and I didn't know his connection. I had seen this book, but this guy can write. And then someone said, wait, he's from Richmond. It's like, wait, what? So these connections that Howard started off talking about are important, and the sense of community is key, especially in a universe as small as the Brandcenter / former ad center. So.
Right, and then the industry itself becomes small because you guys are going to disperse across the country for sure, and likely across the world. And there will be phone calls made. Have you worked with this person before? Are they cool? Are they okay? Because if not, I could find 3 or 4 supremely talented people, but you can't find 3 or 4 that you want to work with. So that's very important. So keep that in mind, because there's plenty of times you're going to be rightfully pissed off at your partner. There's plenty of time you're going to be rightfully carrying more of the load because you have a higher level of expertise, or it just happens to be a brand that you're more familiar with. Don't be an ass about it. Like, figure out how to make it work and make everyone comfortable, because contrary to popular belief, it's not all about the work. And I know that is something you will hear a lot. It's all about the work, it's all about the work. Keep your head down, do great work. If you're lucky, that's 50% of the business. So just keep that in mind. Build your community, be conscious, be respectful, be patient, which is often hard to do with 5 briefs and significant other, and I want to go out tomorrow night, and I'm broke, and all that stuff. Try to be patient with everyone. It will pay dividends in the long run.
So you spent time in the industry.
Yes.
And can you can you give me kind of what were the things? What did you love about it, and also what did you hate about it? Like what sucked?
So I'll start with the love. So you can, it's something I always wanted to do all my life. So I wanted to be a positive shell. The Cadbury egg in the middle is a little suspect. But so what did I love about the business? I love the idea that a lot of people were going to see my work. I love the idea that I could create a catchphrase. I love the idea of, as corny as it sounds, I actually loved advertising. I was never a person in advertising to get to something else. I actually loved advertising. So I literally loved being in the business. But then at 23 years old, single, making a good paycheck in New York, I love what the business afforded me as well. Like, all the different parties, all the contacts, all the connections. Now, inside the agency, I loved learning how to present to a client. I loved learning how a brand worked and why it worked the way it worked. I enjoyed learning that's ultimately what led to my interest in and around strategy, was learning some of what the planners were doing, learning what the other disciplines were doing. But for me as a creative person, the collaboration is what I've always loved most about advertising, about any creative venture, because I think I'm pretty smart. I think I'm pretty creative. But when you meet those people that make you feel like you don't know what you're doing, it's a different level. You learn, you grow, you're challenged, but also you're genuinely interested in this other person as well, and that's just super cool. So that's what I love about it, and which sadly leads to what I hated about it, which is it's far and few between, and all the politics that come in it, because you might fall in love with doing all the work. You might fall in love with working with these amazing partners and people, but sometimes those people, their sole focus is, I gotta be ECD one day. And so there are political games at play at all times. What I didn't love was being the only black guy in the room. I did not love that. I know you dealt with that. I did not love that because it's a job, especially coming from a school like this. When you come out of here, one thing I can tell you for certain is you're ready. You're ready to work, period. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough. You're good enough. You're ready to work. I know how they prepare you. I know what this is. So I had that confidence. So often the moving target of being an other, a different, now that it's popular to say a unicorn, there's so many moving targets. And so if someone tells me, and again, you know, being young when I started, if someone tells you these are the 5 things you need to do to be successful, and you do those 5 things, but you aren't successful, they tell you these are the new 5. That is something that a lot of you will deal with, and that's what I hated about the business, and it's pervasive now. But as I said when I first started, I still love the business, so I had to find a way to just be better. I had to find a way to make myself undeniable. So while I never felt like I got an opportunity to work on A+ client to do A+ work, every C+ client I got, I did B+ work. The difficult part in that, it's a labor of love, because when I go out to meet at Wyman or Shine or Goodby, they say, well, you don't have any A+ work. I didn't get the recognition for taking C client to B+ work, no credit. So it was the moving target of being a minority in this industry. That is what I ultimately hated about the business, and that's why when I was in New York, I knew that I loved writing. I knew that I loved expression. So I would take my behind down to NYU and take screenwriting classes, because that's also something I loved. I would go to Upright Citizens Brigade and take sketch comedy writing classes. I was actually, at the time, as a 24-year-old, I was actually doing that to write better ads. But it ended up being the backbone, and it ended up being my foundation for what I do now. So.
You know, I didn't know that part of your story, and I think about my experience and where I ended up going to NYU, taking class sight and sound film, and I look at the people who were in my class, and there were 12 of us, and Helms from Hangover in my class, Mark Webb, director of this first round of Spider-Man movies. I think we're on the second or third, but you know, and you see how even that, where careers go like this, you're kind of going, well, we had the same exact opportunity,
Right.
but because that target was moving.
Right.
And by the way, those guys are great, and nothing to do with the system. But the
Right.
system is very similar to a lot of career paths. Now, you said advertising you felt was an end-all be-all, you didn't see anything beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, that I have for you is, now you've made this transition.
Right.
You know, what are the tools that you learned in advertising that have you taken some forward to your writing now, and how you approach problem solving creatively, or did you have to kind of do a whole different approach to how you look at work?
I would say that they are parallel industries largely. I would say that 80% of what I did in advertising has worked to my advantage at an advanced age, breaking into a new business that is, you know, pretty tough to break into for anyone. But the art of craft, and one thing that I learned, a writer named Neil Riley, I worked with him at Brigade Cameron Partners, and he never vocalized it, but I always noticed that everything he wrote, literally every second mattered. There was nothing wasted in anything he ever wrote. Every second mattered. And so when I went into sitcom writing, I made a point to make every second matter. So when I write, you'll never really see in dialogue, you'll never see someone just say things. I would rather that be a nod, I'd rather that be a hug. If it's nothing, if it isn't substantive, it doesn't count. And it's something that I learned in one of Kaz's classes. I was reading a piece of body copy by another student, Crockett Jeffers, and he had written this beautiful long copy piece. And I know long copy is all but defunct now, but when I read it, I remember thinking, there's not a single word in this that I would take out if I rewrote it. I remember thinking that as I read it. I was like, every and matters, there's no that's, there's no additional commas. So in the craft of writing, it's make every single thing matter. The other thing was, again, so much comes back to collaboration, because you need to be so self-sufficient and independent that you can do everything on your own, but nobody wants that from you. Everybody wants their thumbprint on something great that you're doing. So even though you might be capable of pulling it off, you have to be open, willing, and capable to let someone else contribute to. And that was something that started here that's critical. I work in a writing room with 9 brilliant writers. And I have ideas that I absolutely love. And the last draft of a script went from 100% mine to like 10% mine. But it's all based on what I set up. So those are the things that from advertising have always helped me. But also, it really helped me to read a room. Because I had to do a lot of presenting starting around year 6 or 7. You're starting to get, for me, into the ACD, CD ranks. I learned how to read a room. I learned, you go into a room with 3 campaigns, you're certain that the second campaign is the one. The others are nice, but it's the second campaign. And people are on their phone. Like people are fading a little bit. You're like, this one's not working. Conversation, switch to the third one. Like learning to read a room is critical. And those things are helpful because, in television, you're pitching all day, literally in a room, 10 to 12 hours, pitching all day, jokes, story, whatever it is, where in advertising, obviously you're going to go into your creative director's office, maybe with a group of people, maybe just one-on-one, but you need to know how to pitch. And so I was prepped for pitching myself as the brand and pitching my ideas.
So there's something in there that I think you said that was valuable. It took me a while to learn. I think the students, even professors, all of us need to know you have to be careful of falling in love with your own work.
Yeah, you cannot be precious. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Or you get your feelings hurt, by the way.
You can get your feelings hurt, and to me, worse than getting your feelings hurt is people smiling to your face and telling other people they don't want to work with you because you're difficult. That's worse than getting your feelings hurt. Because that affects you down the line and for a long time. I would rather someone say directly to me, dude, you're being precious, get over it. I would rather that. It's the things you don't hear are worse than the things you hear. It's like being a boxer. It's not the punch that you see coming that knocks you out, it's the one you didn't see coming.
And I think that's another piece too that is important as you're working with your peers, as you're working with, in school with professors and so on. Criticism without any constructive communication is not helpful. But true constructive criticism, and if you're like, I don't like this, but here's why. Have you thought about this?
Right.
Goes a long way, at least in my experience.
Right.
Versus,
Yeah, the spoken but unwritten rule is if you criticize someone else's pitch, you better have one that beats it. That's kind of the unspoken room in a writer's room. The unspoken rule in a writer's room. It's you cannot be the no person. You won't last. You might make it through that job, you won't get another job. It just doesn't work. And in advertising, it's similar. It's very easy to be the critic. Yeah, I mean, that's easy, and you might be well-founded in your criticisms, but can you beat it? Because that's what it ultimately comes down to. Okay, you see all the problems in it, can you beat it?
Or help fix it.
Can you help fix it? Can you contribute an idea that can be a spark for someone on that team to elevate? Those are the things that advertising in its best form, when you say what do you love about advertising, those were truly the things that I loved about advertising, but those experiences were few and far between.
So, what's next for you? Like, what is that dream job? And I know this is kind of a new area for you, but is there, now that advertising isn't the end-all be-all, and now writing is really become your passion from a more television, broadcast, content standpoint, what's next? What is it doing a film? Is it?
Well, once you break through and break into television writing and you have representation, and it's ridiculous. I grew up in Richmond, so to be here 20 years later is like surreal for me. But once you have representation and you're writing features. You're writing them on spec, or you're trying to build your name up so a studio is interested in your pitch. And that's where I am. I'm still building up. So I'm always developing something, technically for myself, technically for a sample, but at a certain point, when Family Reunion comes out, if it's a hit, people will see who's on that staff, who helped write this show. And so that could make your phone ring, and when your phone rings, you need to be ready with something. That's the other big thing. Like, a lot of people talk about I just need an opportunity, I'm just waiting for my chance, I don't think people recognize enough, or they don't take it, they internalize it enough that when your chance comes, you better be ready. So if you get that phone call from that agency you really want to work at, is your portfolio in shape where they're going to hire you? Not just, I want an opportunity to work at such and such agency, but do you have the stuff to work there? And so for me, when the phone call comes, because I do believe it's a when and not an if, but when the phone call comes that, hey, I think I like this guy, I want to read his stuff, I'm going to have 3 pilots that no one's ever seen before, and I'm going to have 2 features. But that is my end game. My end game is to ultimately in television be a showrunner. I'm not near it now, but I want to be a creator and a showrunner. That's what I want to do. When you think about whether it be Vince Gilligan or Shonda Rhimes or Ryan Murphy or whoever it might be, Kenya Barris now, that's what I want to do. I want to be prolific. I want to be a showrunner, and I want to figure out and learn the craft of feature writing. Now that I'm off the ground and rolling with sitcom writing.
And I may be biased, so you're going to get there, so I'm not even worried about that. So what would be the one piece of advice you would give someone about how to prepare for a career in advertising, marketing, branding? Exactly. Yeah, you were ready.
There's no one.
There's
Yeah.
no, yeah. So,
Okay.
or one thing that you, through your experience, not just, not a generic, say you're crazy before you go to bed, keep
Yeah.
moving, but, but what is that thing that you've learned, the hard lesson that you've learned that you want to share as a, maybe it could be a cautionary tale,
I'll say some things that your grandfather, your father, your mother, your grandmother have probably said 1,000,000 times, but it's true. Be the first person in, be the last person out. I did that a lot. And I won't lie, part of the reason I did it is because I felt like there were extra eyes on me. So that was a part of the reason I did it. But what also happened as an intern, between year 1 and 2, do you guys still go out for internships? So between year 1 and 2, I went to Leo Burnett, and I was pitching, I think I got placed in like the craft group or something like that. And one day Nintendo was understaffed, so I presented some stuff. It didn't get picked, it didn't get sold, but I happened to be around, so they let me present. Fast forward 6 weeks later, a creative director is walking around the craft floor from the Nintendo floor. He says, hey, you're the intern, right? You pitched some ideas, I liked them. You wanna stay late tonight? Sure. I stayed for about what turned into like a 20-hour shift because they had a deadline, they weren't prepared, and I ended up selling my first national campaign as an intern at Leo Burnett just because I was there. Now obviously I must have done something that sold through, but I wouldn't have had a chance to do that if I wasn't physically present. So you actually have to just be there. That's a big part of it. But also you have to be hungry without being thirsty. Like you have to.
I got to get that at Brandcenter. Be hungry.
Yeah, like, you have to find a way for everybody in the room to know how bad you want it without getting on anyone's nerves. That's hard. Like, and I will not sit here and lie revisionist history and say I did that right all the time, because I didn't. But when people know that you want it, that makes it different. Because there's a lot of people that it's on their sleeve that they want to be the boss, but they're not willing to do the work to be the boss. There's a lot of people that are capable, but they don't know how to sell themselves. So you have to find your lane, you have to find your groove, you have to find your zone. So yeah, be hungry without being thirsty. Like, make it clear that you want to do work. And the other, one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever gotten, and I've been blessed, and I like to think I listen, but one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and it's stuck with me to this day, is make your boss's job easier. Period.
Amen.
Yeah. So make your boss's job easier. So if he asked you to do this thing that you don't want to do, don't just do it great. Don't begrudgingly do it great. Now all of a sudden, there's going to be something that comes up that everybody wants to do, and he's going to give it to you. Those are the things that, when you accept those truths, it helps. Like, it's a lot of times where you're like, oh, I wish this wasn't true. Oh, it's got to be a better way. Well, it is true, and there's no better way. So now what are you going to do? And so that's what a lot of my career came down to is, okay, so now what are you going to do? Yep, it's unfair. You've complained about it. You've called your friends. You've pissed and moaned. Now what are you going to do? And that teaches you a certain resiliency, it teaches you a certain perseverance, it makes you do your job that much better. You know, that's like the best. Make your boss's job easier. Be hungry without being thirsty. Those, if I could say that, that will get you your foot in. That will build a good reputation, and then obviously you need to start doing great work. But that's where it begins. You don't get a chance to do great work if you don't do those things first. So, yeah.
Wow. I am going to get that T-shirt made. So.
All right. I'm going to go on LegalZoom and copyright.
Spoken like a true senior creative.
Right.
I want to open the floor to questions. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. Yes, ma'am.
Hey,
Hi, Dan.
I know how hard it is to develop a really terrific 30-second spot, 60-second spot. And I've always wondered and admired, people who are doing longer form work, whether 30 minutes, not 30 seconds. But could you talk about the differences in going that long and what that is like compared to creating something terrific where every second counts as 30 seconds?
Right. Well, it comes down to, the buzzword for the last 5 or 10 years, storytelling. And it really comes down to what is the heart and depth and kind of breadth and scope of telling a specific story. And for me, I'm still learning the art of breaking stories, so I'm thankful to like Bob Daly, who was my first showrunner, and Meg Deloach, who's my showrunner now. But what you're really building from, because I'm a comedy writer, you're building from critical moments of conflict. And the best comedy comes out of tragedy. And how do you track that over the course? You plot out a story over the course of 3 acts, or now in Netflix, about 12 to 15 scenes, because we don't do traditional acts. But it comes down to the depth of a story, where in a commercial, you kind of have to be laser focused on the one thing. And I'm trying to think of something I'm into. Like my favorite show right now is The Good Place. So you're doing a big arc about what it is like to be in, you think you're in heaven, but you're actually in a hell created expressly for you. That's a huge story. That could never be told in 30 seconds, but you can tell chapters of it the way they do. And it's about finding, we use the notion of the big idea. Well, are you capable of finding an idea that's about 30 times bigger, that can be tracked over that amount of time? Like a feature is a story with a definite beginning, middle, and end, but a series is something that can be tracked over time. So you need rich characters, but you also need a larger story and their what are their motivations? What are their conflicts? What are their peaks and valleys? Because you have to play both. You don't get to just play valley to peak like what we do in commercials a lot. You have to be able to actually track it, like an actual wavelength or frequency of some kind. So that's kind of I hope I'm answering the question. That's kind of the best way I can answer it, because and everybody does it differently. Every showrunner you work for breaks a story differently. So that, I hope I'm kind of answering the question, but that desire to learn a longer form is also what led me out of advertising, is because I felt like if we're really in the age of storytelling, you need a different medium and you need a different time period to play with. So one of the things we didn't mention was, my favorite job ever came when I was 40. And that was when I went to Facebook and Instagram. It was a global creative strategist, because I was working, you never work to time. You literally are doing 13 seconds, 6 minutes, 4 minutes, however long it takes to tell your particular story best. So that job was amazing, and I left it ultimately to go to television writing. But it's how long do you need to tell your story? How rich, how deep is your story, and how nuanced is your story? Because you're playing, again, the peaks, the valleys, the nuance, and the character development are critical. And I saw some people in the front, and I said The Good Place.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you read and watch to stay inspired?
Oh my goodness. I believe in a lot of, again, what they teach you here, research and immersion into what you're trying to do. So when I was in New York and I was just riding the subway all day, commuting, I read there was a summer where I think I read, like, I'll be generous to make myself sound better, but I think I read like 10 Steinbeck novels. I got deep into classic American, and then the next summer I think I read 8 Vonnegut novels, and then the next, like, so it was, Steinbeck and Vonnegut were big literary influences. Those are who I like, and a part of the reason I like them is because I know I can never write like that, but it can help me think differently. That's all. Like, I know I can never write that like that. I don't aspire to write like that, but it was inspirational to read words crafted that way. And then I started getting into like Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright, and those, like, people crafting these worlds, like James Baldwin, people telling these stories, and then people who look like me telling stories about people who look like me that aren't being told. I started getting in things that moved me. Now, fast forward, when I discovered, okay, I think I want to be a screenwriter. I went to, it's called Third Fairfax, it's the Writers Guild of America library, and I literally read every sitcom I could get my hands on. For the last 2 years in a row, I've read every single pilot, whether or not it's been produced. But those are the types of things you have to do. So let's see, I'm trying to think of, I'm drawing a blank on some of the books that I've read through the years. Like, for instance, the last thing I picked up just because I thought it would be funny was Glow, the what's his name? Rick James autobiography. That was the last thing I read. So it's a lot of fun, but that was the last thing I read. That wasn't a script, you know, because I've been just totally immersed in scripts. Yeah, was that the whole thing? You said, what am I reading? What am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another hand.
So as a strategist, one thing we're always thinking about is how people are consuming the message we're telling them.
Yes.
And it's so fascinating how for Netflix shows, the way we consume is different than we've ever consumed before. Like, I will watch all of Sabrina in a day, tell everyone I see about it the next day, and then forget about it almost.
Mm-hmm.
So does that change the way that you're writing or your approach to?
Yeah, it does. There's part of why I love the Facebook, Instagram job is because it was the first time I felt like I was getting an education. I got into a point in advertising where if you gave me a brief, I could probably crank out pretty good work inside of 2 or 3 days. It just wasn't inspired anymore. But I had to do a lot of self-educating to get up to snuff with that. And so you know when people are tuning out, when people are tuning in. You know on Netflix that if people aren't hooked by the end of episode 3, they will not be watching episode 4, 5, and 6. You've got to front load your content. But if you front load your content and people stay with you, what do you have for me in episode 4? So you have to, you know, and again, that's the importance of a deep, meaningful, connective through line of a story. And you're writing for an audience that has so many other choices. And you're also writing for an audience that's flipping through their phone. Maybe they haven't heard about the show, you haven't told them to watch Sabrina yet, so their queue has to queue up Sabrina. What's on that first frame to make them say, oh, I want to watch that. I remember Sabrina from when I was a kid. Like, you have to think about literally every element. You know, when I first started, or a year or 2 in, it was like the dawn of everyone just kind of talking about 360. It's not enough to do a print ad, you have to have the ecosystem. And I will say back then, at most agencies, you know, obviously there are exceptions, and the exceptions are great agencies for a reason. They were actually doing 360s, but most agencies would talk about 360. It was just a talking point. It was just to fill out a presentation deck. They weren't actually making it. Where now you're in a world where every single interaction matters. Every single interaction matters. You're building your brand, because if I believe you to be one thing and then I see your billboard and it's garbage, you're out of home, it'll change what I think about you, and it's still a week before you air and I'm not gonna watch it now. So every single element matters. That's the big difference, but also you need to be entertaining with kind of there needs to be a pulse to the entertainment. You can't give me shockers and then dull moments, shockers and then dull moments. You have to keep me on a rhythm and then spike and then a rhythm. But there needs to be peaks and valleys, then huge peaks and valleys, and huge peaks. And that is a part of the consideration in writing something. Like we were working on an episode. We're doing 3 episodes. It'll be broken into 10 and 10. but we were thinking about episode 10 while we were doing episode 4. We were thinking about episode 20 while we were doing episode 9. Like, we're so, you know, you're tracking story arcs, you're also tracking what is the drama in this, which is a part of my joy of being a comedy writer, is how much time we spend on drama. But we know that people want both. And how do you live in that space in a way that, you know, we're tracking numbers of laughs per page, all of that. So that's kind of your, you know.
I saw a hand here, but I want to, sir?
Yeah, I have a question. You know, when you've been doing what you do for as long as you've been doing it, I know it's got to be tough to kind of keep having original thoughts, especially when it seems that everything you've studied and everything you've watched, it's like everything just sort of seems like it's been done before. So I'm kind of curious as to how you kind of keep coming up with original content and what you might do when you find yourself in a rut to break the writing block.
Now in television or in advertising or both?
Kind of just like, I don't know, I don't think it really matters if it's an ad or whether it's a script, but you know, just to kind of find that.
For me, it really is about kind of taking in the world around me. I know corny can't answer, but it's really just kind of about being awake in the world and trying to play to things that would interest me. So I try to flip it a little bit, and I honestly say, like, what would I like right now? What would I like to receive? What message would I like to view? What would entertain me? If that doesn't work, an old trick that I started here, if that doesn't work, I would actually say, well, Vann, you know, I don't have any ideas for this thing I'm working on. What would Vann do? Because I've worked with him off and on, and we sit next to each other half the time, you know. So what would Vann do? What would Vann's voice be? And I would just try to find a different starting point. That's one of the things I used to do, and ultimately I would be like, Vann's idea sucks anyway.
But says the same thing all the time. So.
But those are the types of things. I would always try to define and redefine a starting point or an ending point. Like, what would I like this to be? One of the things I used to do, you know, you always will have clients basically tell you how to edit something, basically tell you how to re-art direct something. And because, you know, largely because of Peter here, you know, you learn different lessons about how to present yourself and how to present your work and how to keep control of a room. And I don't know where it sprung from one day, but I told a creative director, I told a like a mid-level type of client person, it's like, don't tell me what you want me to write, tell me what you want to feel. And that's very important. Like, what are the feelings that you're trying to convey? Maybe that can start you different. How would the person sitting next to you do it? That might start you different. And also, I hope you guys are keeping the journals of the ideas that didn't work on one thing, because I guarantee you they do work on something else. They will. And the truth is, they could have worked on that original thing, but it just wasn't well received that day. So go through your old stuff. Go through, think what other people who you respect and like would probably do in a similar situation. And if all else fails, just try to have fun with it. Like, make yourself laugh at the most absurd, garbage idea, far-fetched idea, and I bet you it works. You know?
You said you worked as a creative strategist.
Yeah.
From what I read, that's kind of when you were more marketing.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you liked about it, didn't like about it, and why you think it worked?
Well, I liked everything about it, to tell you the truth. It was great. Creative strategists at Facebook and Instagram, it was new to me. And so after I went through the interview process, after they hired me, they would serious, tongue-in-cheek combination, they would say, you know, it takes about 6 months to get this job right. And everyone I met was brilliant. Everyone I met was fantastic as a collaborator. And everyone said it takes about 6 months to get this job right. And I was like, well, you know, I can probably figure it out in 3. It took me 6 months to get the job. And ultimately, what we were doing as creative strategists, because we had intimate knowledge of the platforms, because we knew all the metrics and we had access to back-end data, what we would all present as individuals were narratives. My vertical was the entertainment vertical. So I used to ironically go to Netflix, Warner Brothers, Disney. I used to go there and help them launch properties that were probably 6 months to a year down the road from being released to the public. So to do that, first you have to educate the people there, because they don't necessarily, a lot of people say, but nobody's on Facebook. It's like, well, it's 1.1 billion daily users, so people are on Facebook. Well, nobody's, Instagram's fading. Well, ever since Instagram stories came in, it's this many million people, and after I gave the first metric on 1.1 billion, I'm like, oh crap, probably shouldn't have said that. But what you do is you educate them first about what the platform is. But it's a combination sales meeting, pitch meeting. And so when they're telling you what they're going to do next, you say, for me, it was, I can help you do that. I can optimize what you're already doing, or I can present campaigns of my own that work on the platform. So the strategist part came from knowing the metrics, knowing the data, knowing the market they were trying to reach, knowing what influencers over-index in those markets, knowing those types of things and sharing that with them as the grounds and the justification for my own creativity, but educating them because they were already spending on the platform. So as a creative strategist, you're literally doing the work that supports the strategy. So it's not enough where when I was coming up, a planner would kind of find a nice in and step away for the creative department. Imagine being the creative and the planner. That's basically it, but in a very functional, real way. Yeah.
Any questions?
Can I interrupt?
You want to make, that's right, you want to make an
I've
introduction?
got someone
Absolutely.
who's going to leave, and I want to just say a word about probably a fair amount of you have heard of Ichir Zong. He graduated here out of creative brand management, right? In 2015, and like Howard, Ichir's one of my very favorites. And there are a number of people here that are my favorites today. But Ichir's got to head out. He flew in this week from Beijing. He was, in the last couple of weeks, he was named under 30 in China by Forbes magazine as a creative content disruptor in a good way. Can you stand up for a sec? Yeah, this is my He's a great guy to connect with. He's here because he's doing some special workshops for U of R. He's also a grad out of finance and marketing from University of Richmond. And I was lucky enough to meet him when he was over in undergrad and not here yet. But he started his own agency right off the bat in LA. They got China Air and kind of got off to a great start, but there were some other issues, so he moved back to Beijing. But he's got a new startup called Flip the Script, which Howard says he used to tell Jelly Helm here at
Every time Jelly asked me what I wanted to do with my career, I said, just flip the script.
So they're already bonded.
So I want to give you
He's got to leave.
Yeah,
so
I know you're
don't
about to
wanna-
leave. And we've had some great conversations yesterday, and we hope to see you more here at the Brandcenter. Again, as part of our earlier conversations around community. Your community is not just Richmond, and Howard said it, it goes beyond the confines of this building. So make sure that you connect with him and all the other folks that are part of this. We all have enough time for a few more questions. Yes, I just see a hand. Oh, Gloria. Yes.
Hi, I'm Gloria. I'm an experienced designer here.
Hey, Gloria.
Hi, my question is, how do you approach writing and screenwriting for us non-writers, if we are us non-writing mindsets and want to write something?
So you're just curious, you have a story to tell and you want to know how to write it?
Yes, and get started.
Stand up. What is the, can you say a little about the story without being too embarrassed?
Yeah, it's like an idea for like a screenwriting or a movie that I want to create in my future.
I started, when I knew I was like deadly serious, obviously I took a class, but I also bought a couple of reference books. And one of the books that people swear by is Save the Cat. Another, the title's evading me, but go on Amazon, look for a couple of 5-star books, and just browse through them and highlight them. But the best thing you can do is start writing the story, because it will take on a life of its own, and you'll see if it's a feature, you'll see if it's a series, but truly start writing it. Figure out what you think you want it to be and start writing it, and as you're writing it, learn the formatting. And I know it sounds a little daunting, but learning the formatting actually makes the writing easier, because there are certain landmarks in any feature that you have to hit as you're writing, and that'll be really helpful.
Thank you.
We have kind of a social thread going on Facebook about where do
I
people...
can't hear you. People back can't hear you. Yeah,
Where
what
do
do you
people...
Where do you store your ideas? Because you said, well, go back through your old ideas. Do you keep notebooks? Do you?
The first 2 or 3 drafts of anything I write are going to be handwritten. At least the core of the idea is going to be handwritten. So I probably have about 50 notebooks. I still have my very first notebook from when I was a student here. So, and it's a handwritten notebook. But now I keep files. I have a file called Agency Archive, and I literally have every freelance assignment I've ever done. So things like that, like you have to kind of archive yourself. And a part of the reason I was doing that at first was because, I don't know if I mentioned this broadly, but in my career I split it in half, inadvertently, I split it in half between staff and freelance. And so I always had notebooks of ideas, because sometimes you get called into emergency situations when you freelance, and it can pay you well, but it will stress you the hell out, and you need to hit the ground running. You don't get a chance to have any type of writer's block. You don't get a chance. So for me, it's handwritten notebooks. It's a couple of deep files on my computer.
You, when we were talking earlier, you said, hey, let's talk about interviewing.
Yes.
So, can you give us your thoughts about it? Because I bet they're interesting and funny.
Yeah, it varies. It varies. Interviewing, and I'm assuming most of you guys are going to go out to agencies, but when you interview, you got to come in ready to say, this is what I can do for you. This is who I am, and this is why I'm cool to hang out with. That has to happen. I'd say within the first 4 or 5 minutes. That has to happen within the first 4 or 5 minutes. But also in that, nobody cares necessarily. People will respect that you graduated from the Brandcenter. You wouldn't be having the interview if they didn't love your portfolio. But there are talented people everywhere. So what story can you tell that only you can tell? How were you raised? Where have you been? What have you seen? Look around their office. Do they like basketball? Tell them a basketball story. Do they like, find something in the room? I walked on at James Madison University, a glorified practice squad basketball player, and I got a chance to meet Jerry Tarkanian. You would be at practice for Jerry Tarkanian and Electric Giselle once, and I have a great Tarkanian story. You'd be surprised at how many people I've interviewed with, because I put a line on my website that just said, expert level WWE knowledge, WCW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, expert level, and I named a few weird things, like from the movie Office Space, like I gave myself Sparkle, some pieces of, whatever, was it called Sparkle? Flair. So, thank you. So now if we meet somewhere and you're like, hey, what about that scene in Office Space? Like, do that. But it's really interesting what people gravitate toward, because I had the portfolio, and obviously I was there, but telling a Tarkanian story that was ultimately like a diss on me was funny and charming, and they remember it, and when they are meeting with the other people later, they will say, all right, we met 5 people today, that guy's out, I didn't like him, that girl's out, didn't like her. Okay, of the 3, they actually need to remember who you are. You need to be memorable. So they know you had a good book because you were there, but are you memorable in a way where they could say, oh, but what about the guy who told the Tarkanian story? Oh yeah, let's hire him. Like you need to have something that separates you in how you talk about yourself, how you talk about this business. Like, what's your perspective on the business, especially if you've researched or studied the person you're interviewing with, and you know they have a specific point of view on the industry, and you believe in that. It's nothing interviewers love more than hearing about how great they are. You have to find you. It has to be about you. You know, it's not a shell game. It has to be about you. But if they can see themselves in you, you've got a leg up. You know, and that's where I would say to the people of color. That's where I would say to the women specifically. Find your way to navigate those conversations where you are an asset that is familiar in a way that they are not typically familiarized with a person like you. That's kind of critical. That's kind of important.
So,
And I think my Maggie Walker guy had a question.
yes, sir.
It's already built.
We
We
have.
have enough for you. You Maggie Walker, baby. Here we go.
But see, example. Unfair as it may be, you may be out of time. I met him earlier. He's also from Richmond. So I'm like, no, let him ask his question. But those are the things that happen.
Well, funny enough, also from Kitcher Park. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there we go.
Fantastic. We're probably related.
I was just wondering what the process for getting from the ad industry to the film and TV industry was like, and what that process was like for you.
So I was freelancing at RGA. I was creative director for when Beats by Dre was introducing the little portable speakers called the Pills, anthropomorphic little characters. So I would, and my wife and I were still pretty new to LA at the time. I would work at RGA in Santa Monica, and I would say I would get there at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I would typically leave around 7:30 or 8. I was a newlywed, so I would go home. Spend time with my wife. She would go to bed around 10. I would stay up from 11 p.m. to about 2 a.m. every night for a year and a half writing. That's what I did. I started winning writing competitions, which made managers call. And then I learned about the fellowships. And you need new material, you need you need a letter of interest, things like that. So when I learned about the fellowships at the different networks, I started new materials for that. And ultimately it took me, I didn't get in the first year. The second year I got into the CBS fellowship while working at Facebook, while traveling to San Francisco, writing at hotels, writing on planes. And I did both. I worked at Facebook while taking a full fellowship, developing a series with CBS executives. So when people say there aren't, one excuse that never will fly with a person like me is there wasn't enough time. Like, that's just not true. It's how you spend your time. Especially as young as you guys are, you might not get to sleep. That's a choice you will make. And you need to figure out for yourself what that balance is. Because me working 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. every single night is only a waste if I let it be a waste. But I was getting better, I was taking people's notes, I was starting to meet people, and it also proved how bad it proves how bad you wanted it, and not to anyone else but myself. So that was my process. A year and a half, somewhere between a year and a half and 2 years, I was writing at least 6 nights a week from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. every single night. So that was my real process, and the major breakthrough came when all that writing got me into the CBS writers program.
Any other questions? Am I missing? Yes, sir.
I feel like there's the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about.
Yes.
There's that iconic Key and Peele sketch with the angry black man behind him.
Uh-huh.
And I want to know how you mitigate that on a regular basis during your work, and how you decide, that's going to come out today, or it's not going to come out today, or how often it comes up.
Well, you remember that scene in Avengers, the first Avengers, where Bruce Banner says he controls the Hulk?
You're my hero.
Right? He controls the Hulk?
Yes.
Because he's always the Hulk.
Yes.
So I try to be myself in every situation I'm in. And I am by no means the angry black man, and just from your temperament, I don't think you are either. I think it's easy to be cast in that way because you're different and you don't get to be ticked off. Like, that's a fact. I'm 6'6". Some people say I'm 6'7". But so when I was here, I was 21. So looking around the room, think of yourself when you're 21. So I'm 21 years old, I'm 6'6" tall, and I'm frustrated. So there may have been some people saying I was the angry black, and I think you guys can see that that's not the case. But I think for me, it's not like the Key and Peele sketch. It really is knowing who you are as a person and knowing how far you go. You guys are going to meet a lot of people in this business that will make choices that you would never make from a moral standpoint. You're going to meet a lot of those people, and those decisions that they might make might actually push them further up faster than you. That might happen. But I've never been jealous of one of those people because I knew I wasn't capable of making that decision. I'm not going to do that thing. I've got to look at myself in the mirror in the morning. And so for you, you're going to have to decide what's important to you. Because there are going to be moments, it's not going to be like egregious, in your face craziness, but what's going to happen is someone's going to say a handful of those right things that turn that combination lock, and you're going to have to wonder and in that moment, you're going to have to decide, am I going to make this the hill I'm willing to die on? I've died on a lot of hills. It's a fact. And when I look back at it, I probably didn't have to die on that many hills. So you're going to have to find your way to say, this is who I am right now, and this is who I want to be in the future. Because if you have a clear vision of who you want to be, then I would advise you not to curse out your director. That's what I would say. And don't take, and again, back to one of the first questions, don't take everything personally, because it might not be about you. And again, I use the phrase a lot, the best piece of advice, because I've been blessed. I've met a lot of really talented people. But one of the best pieces of advice I got was, that person didn't screw you, they would have screwed anyone standing in your spot. That helped me. That helped me get into less confrontations. That helped me get into less drama. But when you get really good and you're working your talent and you're honing your craft, you will get to a point where you know your work on paper is worthy and valid regardless to what anyone else says. That's why you have to save your work. That's why you have to keep it. And one day you'll break through. And for all of the creatives and for all the strategists, your first boss in this business is critical to your career. You could be doing killer work, but if they don't buy it and elevate it to the client and put the money in production, you're an also-ran. So those relationships are critical. Just decide who and how and what you want to be. And it's really funny because you're over my buddy Marcel's right shoulder. And he was at Fallon, New York when I was at Berlin Cameron. And he and I have plenty of stories. So I would advise you, he lives in Richmond, I would advise you to connect. But that's a real question. I appreciate that question. And yeah, it does matter. And although it's unfortunate, it's a fact that when you're the different one out of 50, you would think it's their job to make you comfortable, but it's actually your job to make them comfortable. And it's not fair. I'm not saying it's fair, but sitting here knowing what I know now and seeing you in school, I'm saying that to you, even though I know that me at 23 would be like, oh, you sell out. Because I would say that. I would be like, that's unfair. That's not right. But it's not unfair. Excuse me. It is unfair, and it's not right. But it is what it is. What are you going to do about it? That's what I would say to that. And angry black man, no good. So, no good.
Actually, you know about that. Okay. So Dean said I was too slow in running around and giving people the mic, so he's going to stand back there. Any other questions? All right, there you go, Dean.
Well, there's one in the back. Green shirt. Gloves.
Oh, that's cool. Hello.
Hello.
My name is Fumi. I'm a first-year copywriter.
What? I should have got you down here too.
Yeah, I'm the only black one.
I am the first black guy to finish the program.
Nice.
So I feel for you.
Can you just run us through everything that you've been doing to hustle through your advertising career, and then your career as a screenwriter, and then your future career as a showrunner? And this might seem a little simple, but I just want to know what you do to relax in your downtime, and how you've been able to de-stress in times that you feel like you're firing on all cylinders. And yeah.
Now that I'm a father, I play with my son. I have a 3-year-old named Moses, and I take him to swimming classes and things like that. And I spend time with my family and just try to kind of be quiet and unplug. But part of my de-stressing is writing. I genuinely enjoy writing, especially for myself, which I get to do in a truer form now. What was the other part of that? You said, what do I do to de-stress? What else?
I just wanted to know how you take care of yourself when you feel like you're like your life is falling apart.
Well, I want you to email me. I want you to email me. And I mean that. I want her to email me. But one of the things that I discovered was therapy. That was very important. You know, I had to get past the stigma because we don't do therapy. So I had to get past that stigma in New York. But it was when I started feeling really depressed when I was really successful. And that was weird. And so I had to go, I went to therapy about it to have those conversations and really examine who I was and what I was doing and why was I doing it, my patterns and my tendencies. The other thing that I would say is spend time with non-industry friends. Because what you guys are going to end up doing a lot is hanging with each other, which is fantastic. You can support each other. You know the hustle. You understand it. Because a lot of friends are going to be like, why can't you hang out? Where if you tell one of these people, I can't hang out tonight, they're like, neither can I. Everybody gets it. So you do need to find non-industry friends. So when you complain, you can hear how great you actually have it. But you also need to have non-industry friends, so when you complain, they're like, I don't care. So you need that balance. You need to find that balance and search for the things that really make you happy, whether it's working out, whether it's traveling. One thing that advertising afforded me is on my 25th birthday, my gift to myself was a passport. I had never been out of the country, and I started traveling. And that was great because I would be in situations, I would be in meetings that were not cool, but then I would think of my day rate and I would think of my next trip, and I was good. You know, and that's what you need.
And by the way, VCU offers free counseling. I just, you know, I send a lot of
So yeah,
students
take
over
advantage and talk. Don't internalize because other people are going through. It's some of the tried and true things in life. Don't internalize too much. Other people are going through the same stuff, and that could be kind of the foundation of a community as well. Is, you know, we're in this similar spot. Find people that naturally know where you're at, where you're going through, because they're going through a similar version of it, and that believe it or not, that will happen. You know, that can and will happen. So I would say just try to find the joy in what you're doing, but also step outside of it and look for the other things that really elevate you, really bring your spirit up. And email me and we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Brielle. I'm a first-year art director.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. So I feel like one of the struggles I've at least had creatively is like finding what you're good at, but then falling into a rut of it, like finding out, oh, I'm really good at comedy, or I'm really good at writing something serious. So how do you let yourself be versatile, and is there anything dangerous about just being good at one thing?
I think you've already identified the danger. I think staying in your lane is not a good thing. Having your lane is great in the 11th hour because you know you can produce something that's good enough, but you need to explore. You need to try new things. And I wouldn't, and you know, language is power, you know? And I would never say, let myself do something. I would say, dare myself to do something, demand myself to do something different, challenge myself to do something different. You don't have to let yourself, just go do it and you know, be a badass about it. Because, you know, and this is one of the things that I know that I used to feel that wasn't necessarily most popular when I was a student, but I was naturally competitive. You know, at the time we had 3 tracks, 20 people per track, and when I finished, I was like, I gotta be one of the best 3 people here. I gotta be, you know, and no one put that on me, but you can't be one of the best doing the same thing. One thing that I always wanted was I wanted to have a voice, but I didn't want to have I wanted to have a voice, I wanted to have a level of expertise, but I didn't want there to be 100 ads on the wall and anyone who had seen 1 or 2 of my ads could point all my ads out. You know, 'cause as an art director, you can't allow yourself to fall into the same aesthetic because everything looks the same. But why would everything look the same? You're working on children's clothing, you're working on car insurance, why would everything look the same? So you have to investigate those worlds, and you have to give yourself the mandate that I will invent. Like, that's very important. And you know, it's great that you guys are doing strategy and doing tech, because you've got to invent. Like, you've got to be in a brand new space, and you really do need to challenge yourself to do that. And there's only upside to it. Like, when you challenge yourself to do something new, you're a better creative, you make more money, you might get promoted. If you do the same thing all the time, you don't. So it's an easy decision to make. So I would say challenge yourself. You always challenge and dare yourself to do it differently than you've been doing it. And it's great to have that to fall back on if you're pressed for time. It's great to have that to fall back on, but don't make that your thing. Like, you have to elevate your baseline. Fine. Hello.
Hi, Howard. How are you? I told you I was coming. We went to school together. We're all there watching. Anyway, I just want to reiterate what Bridget said, because, and what you said, that if you're not strong enough to start with, you need to talk to somebody, because it can really rip you apart.
Right.
So do it. Don't say, oh, no, I'm fine, and then be just bleeding, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Once you get to talk to somebody, and I mean, I promise you, in this room full of people, there are probably 3 people who don't need therapy. If that, because we're all creative, and the problem is the creative people, we're a little wacky. And I learned the hard way, because I was second year here, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I did work with Howard. He was one of the reasons I'm here, because he was one of the nicest guys I've ever worked with. And he kept me going, even though I was like crawling on my knees half the time. So if you need to go talk to somebody, if you do it, Van will tell you where to go. Somebody will tell you where to go.
Yeah. And I want to say,
don't be embarrassed.
I want to say, because I know we're running out of time. I know I'm going to see some of you later, but be very, very confident. Be convicted. Have purpose, but don't be too proud. That's what I would say as well. Like, don't be like, I want this so bad, and I'm so damn good at it, I'm gonna work my behind off. But don't be too proud. Like, you really have to find your balance. And sometimes, quite honestly, it just comes with age and experience. Like, even if you believe it, it might be hard to execute it. Don't be too proud, but work your butt off. Be confident in what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what you hope to achieve. But don't be afraid to reach out, to connect, to ask someone. And I want to go back to one of the very first questions.